Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm joined by Liam Carrigan, Ian Conroy, and Lawrence Connolly. We have the Skylark, we have Japan, we have New Zealand. We're international and continental. Liam, talk us through that top. Do you even have to explain this?
I found a Panathinaikos shirt at the bottom of my cupboard this morning, and I had an overwhelming urge to put it on. I can't imagine why. Purely coincidental, I'm sure.
Beautiful crest on the Panathinaikos jersey, some really decent merch. Ian, always a pleasure to have you back in on the show. We're going to be talking about Celtic clearing the decks, and it does look as though we are working hard. This is something Lawrence says all the time, to get a lot of these non-contributing players that are not in the gaffer's plans, out the door. Are we clearing the decks for quality? That's a big question.
I think that's more of a hopeful kind of statement or kind of view. I think, there's no good reason why we couldn't be sort of bringing in targets whilst simultaneously looking to offload the guys that are kind of a drain on resources that aren't contributing. So I don't really buy into that. I'd love us to just go out. And I think it sort of goes against as well, because obviously the later in the transfer window we get, the higher prices can go up, as we found that to our cost last season. So I don't get it. We do it all the time, considering we never net spend. So it's I don't get it at all. I wish we just go out, give Brendan the tools that he needs to go and do his job, and those that are sort of tasked with getting rid of the other players, they can do that in the background.
Yeah, it is. There's a few moving parts to this, of course, Lawrence. We always go back to, Brendan Rodgers' comments around what he sees as a manageable level when it comes to squad numbers. And I think he likes the extended number to be about 25. But obviously you're working day in, day out with guys who are contributing maybe 18 players. You want to have an 18-strong squad going into the Champions League. Guys that you can call upon as backups who come in and it's flawless. You don't see a drop in quality.
Yeah, you're looking for two players for every position, more or less, aren't you? I think the challenge we've got is we need 5 club trained and 5 league trained, who could also supposed to be club trained. You need that 10 in total. 5 of them must be club trained. And I think with Kieran coming back, Ross Doohan, third choice keepers are really going to play. Tony Ralston, James A. Callum. We're getting up there, and it looks like Dane Murray's a bit of a favourite of Brendan. So hopefully this is a breakthrough season from him where he gets, properly established. I know he's had his injury that held him back, but we could be up to 6 club trained. You've got Luke, who's league trained. I don't know who the other 3 are going to be. A few of the boys have shown up well in pre-season. I don't know if they've done well enough to come into the first team squad. Thought Robbie Ure showed well, but talk of him getting out and loaning, it could probably do with the minutes. But it'll be interesting to see who makes up the rest of the squad. As far as getting numbers in, sometimes price goes up late in the window, sometimes it comes down. Sometimes players become available late in the window who weren't available earlier. We're one of the first leagues back. We decide on a squad and start moving people out. Brendan seems to like to shop in England. Players there, they come back later, so perhaps they'll be available later, told they're not included in the matchday squad or the Europe squad, and to look elsewhere. I think in general, recruitment's, it's got a lot of credit in the bank, the recruitment team. Japan's looking good. The left back that came in, I don't know if he'd describe him as much more of a punt, but recruitment's obviously done their work. Pre-season, he's looked great, as if he'll be a good understudy for Kieran. I know kind of ourselves we've done well against Newcastle. It's kind of the standard opposition we should be facing, I think, in England. When we play them, get a 4-0 win, fairly comprehensive. And across the city, they face the standard opposition they should be facing, and didn't do so well. But it's probably what you'd expect from a squad.
The big thing for me, from the points you've made there, Lawrence, I think when it comes to the quota, the homegrown quota, I remember Brendan talking about the fact that there are some young players who make up the numbers, if you like, almost in that squad. But I think if you're one of the young guys that are playing in pre-season, that would be your target, Liam. If you're Colby Donovan, you're thinking, right, you know what, I might never get a game, but look at Mitchell Frame. Mitchell Frame ended up playing in the Champions League. And I think that needs to be an ambition of these young kind of fringe players who are in and around the squad in pre-season, that they might be one of the guys that ends up in the Champions League squad. That's a tremendous thing to target for a young kid coming through.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is the thing about every pre-season is an opportunity. I keep saying that to get into the Celtic team now, you don't just need to be good, you need to excel in order to displace the people that are already there. But if a young player can step up and do that, then, things can happen. Like you say, Champions League, we're going to have to put probably 2 or 3 of them into the squad anyway. So this will largely determine who amongst the group gets those places.
No, without a doubt. Now, listen, we're talking obviously about how things are going in the pre-season, Ian, and the discussion yesterday I had with Quinny was quite interesting insofar as, if you rewind a year where we're beating Chelsea and Man City, you're always tempering your enthusiasm, but you're up against quality, and I think the last 2 sides we've played are undoubtedly, of quality. The point I made there at the weekend was we started with Inamura. We'll come back to what Lawrence says around that. Even if he's been well scouted, it's still a bit of a punt when you look at a player who's only played 30 senior games of football. Inamura, 250 grand, Johnny Kenny, 150 grand. There were Newcastle players on that park who probably make more than what Johnny Kenny costs, and they make that a week. What was your take on that? Because obviously you've got a bit of a connection to Newcastle yourself. What was your take on the travelling support and the performance by Celtic?
I'd only saw the highlights, so I haven't got a massive amount to say really on the actual game. And it's like, last season when we sort of turned over the 2 EPL teams and obviously Newcastle as well, if the scores had been reversed, they'd have been lording it over us, and obviously when we get the favourable results, it's almost like just underplay, like, oh, it was just we're just getting up to speed. You guys are further along than us. Any game against English teams against Scottish teams is always a big deal, and no one wants to lose them. In terms of the travelling support, I spent sort of the latter part of my schooling years in the northeast in Washington. So my step family are all Sunderland fans, so that's my leanings when it comes to the northeast. They've got a kind of a half and half in terms of Celtic and Rangers, I would say, in terms of their sort of support. Newcastle, again, I think they're a bit like Leeds. They're kind of, that they've got a big support, but they're a one-team city. So I think they kind of think they're a bit bigger than they are, But and in terms of the support, it was. I think there's a lot of good eggs there, but that kind of faction that seemed to have attached itself to our nearest and dearest. In the songbook, I had just talking about it yesterday. You and Quinny yesterday on the pod. It's disappointing, but it's you can't come to expect it. I didn't think Villa would kind of act that way, but they kind of acted that way a little bit when we were down at Villa Park as well. Again, it's a faction, it's a section of the team, a fan base rather than the whole club. No,
you're right. It's a section, without a doubt. And I think that obviously, if you're that way inclined, all it takes is for someone to take a wee, put an arm around you, take them to their boozer and fill your head full of the same kind of nonsense. Easily disenfranchised people. And when you look at the scenes from the fan zone down at Barazat and Design, a completely different vibe entirely. I'm going to come back to Inamura then, Lawrence. You brought Inamura up, and it's one of the ones where, we spoke about it when we signed him. He's being unveiled as a first team signing. And then you look at the comments that Brendan made, puts a wee bit of doubt in your mind about his involvement, or a big bit of doubt about his involvement in bringing the player to the football club. But when you base it just on what he's done on the park for Celtic, he looks every inch a first team player, Lawrence.
So we criticise, for not spending enough, but it looks like they've uncovered a diamond here, doesn't it? He looks great for us so far, what we've seen. Gets only pre-season. Yeah, Brendan didn't. Maybe Brendan didn't want to put too much pressure on him. He's also saying, well, look, he'll review the videos on him, etc. We had the report on him. But he's maybe not expecting too much for that money, but I think he's been outstanding for us, and it's same with Negrin. I think he's been great. I think that the signings we've seen so far have been good. Cracking pre-season for us so far. But if our recruitment team kind of unearths guys at that value, that have got that kind of quality, it's an outstanding job, you know.
You know this, Lawrence, right? I have said this. The two players you mentioned are Negrin and Inamura, right? So £2 million for the two of them. You just don't do that in football. There's, that's not the markets that Champions League football clubs are really operating in, Liam. So I absolutely agree with Lawrence. We're quick to criticise recruitment. I know I am, right? Very, very quick to criticise the board. But if you're able to, and I'm not saying that, oh, by the way, this means we need to operate within that area in terms of the financial element of it, because I think as well as that, you need to also bring in the quality that's going to cost you a wee bit more. Absolutely. But see if you can continue to find these nuggets. Let's not forget what the likes of Maeda cost us and Matt O'Reilly and Rio Atati. I mean, bargain doesn't even cover it, Liam. And it's early doors. We're talking a few minutes in pre-season, not getting completely over the top excited about it. But the signs are good with these two guys. And as I said there at the moment, the outlay is £2 million. That's unheard of at this level.
Well, the thing is, Ida and Engels both been for a lot of criticism last season. And I think we all agreed a lot of it came off the back of how much we paid for them, which was probably too much, but that wasn't their fault. By the same token, Negrin is we know he's worth a lot more than what we paid for him because of the contract situation. Inamura will, I think, in the fullness of time, whatever happens with his Celtic career, whether he makes it or not, I think he's already shown that he's going to go for more than £250,000 when he leaves. So, that's already looking like a deal that's going to, at the very worst, turn a profit. So I think, players don't set their prices high or low. So I would say don't get too hard on a player who comes in for 8 or 9 million and doesn't hit the ground running. But at the same time, don't write a player off just because he was 250 grand.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible to think that we paid 250 grand for John Hewitt in 1990. And here we are in 2025 paying 250 grand. But as you say, if you're basing it just on his performances, then you're sitting here, if we had paid, and we have done in the past, guys, if he's bowling golly and we don't know a great deal about him and we brought him for £2.5-3 million, and you're looking at the performances, you're sitting actually watching him thinking, he looks like a decent player. You know what I mean? And that's 2.5 to 3 million. But back on your point there about Engels, if we look in that area of the park, Engels versus McKeown, right? Different players, I get it, different attributes. They both come in as midfielders in the same season. One costs £1 million, one costs £11 million. Who had the best season last year? Well, for me, in terms of contribution, it's Arnie Engels. But I hear a lot more criticism of Engels than I do for McKeown, Liam. So I think it is that perception of the transfer fee, isn't it? There's absolutely no doubt about it. And then when you're looking at a guy like Kenny, it's almost as if he's got a bit of free pass because he never cost anything. Yet he's putting in these performances. And I think that as well as turning players' heads, you can turn the manager's head. And I think that Johnny Kenny is doing a great job of that. I'll throw this one over to you, Ian. Johnny Kenny's a guy who could have left and nobody would have batted an eyelid at various stages of his Celtic career. But I'll go back to this argument where continually I hear pre-season means nothing, bounce matches, they mean nothing. They absolutely do mean something, because there are players within the squad who can put in a marker to the gaffer and say, I want to be part of this. And Johnny Kenny, for me, is in that category. A guy who would have been shipped out, nobody would have bothered, really. But because of his performances, his attitude, his application, the way that he's approaching these games, like it's the last game of football he'll ever play for Celtic, it's got a lot of fans, me included, thinking maybe we should keep this guy. And it could also change the mind of the gaffer as well.
Yeah, I thought that before anyway. And, obviously the Irish connection is playing a large part, I would say. But I suppose the League of Ireland, what sort of level would you say that is? Is it non-league? I don't know, League One in England or even here.
Hartlepool's level, mate.
It's what?
That Hartlepool's level.
Right.
Lawrence, you never miss. You never miss, mate. Grenade thrown, fire shot. Yeah, there we go. Shots fired even. There you go.
So there's going to be a kind of a play in terms of him, obviously stepping up a level to a massive club like Celtic, just across the water. But and you know, it's kind of, you know, we're kind of these Isle based. I think sometimes when you see players that are coming from sort of mainland Europe and maybe not sort of the Far East, they haven't got that kind of that instilled hunger and desire that kind of maybe a more British or Irish contingent would kind of display. So I think I'm really glad, and like I said on previous pods before, he looks like an accomplished player. He looks like a really good footballer in terms of the stature, the way he holds the ball, holds himself, and also the way I like the way he heads the ball. He looks like it. You know, I remember it was Noel Whelan years ago when he broke through at Leeds. He was like 19 when he broke through, but he looked in a similar kind of a similar kind of style. You know, big and strong, and was good in the air and stuff. So, in the little snippets that I've seen really of Johnny Kenny, I've liked what I've seen. So, you know, marrying that with the sort of obviously the hard work he's putting in and making Brendan sit up and take notice, that can only kind of inspire other players in a similar position as well within the squad. You know, and I've said this again in previous pods, you've got Calmac and now you've got Kieran Tierney coming in. That standard and benchmark that's up there, which is in line with Brendan Rodgers. That's the standard. If you're not cutting it a la, you know, Nicholas Kuhn, then you'll be called out and you won't last long. You know, and that means it's every week, every training session and every game. And that's the standards that we expect as fans, and that's certainly the standards that Brendan Rodgers will be expecting.
This is true. I mean, when you talk about the Irish element of it, is that really, Ian, us looking at the Irish game and not really regarding it too highly and thinking, well, he's only came from the League of Ireland? Because I remember having that attitude, and I've got to admit it, and it's out there. I had that attitude about Liam Scales when we signed him. And I remember people coming in the comments who watched the game over in Ireland and said, you know, don't underestimate Scales, don't underestimate our league. And I've got to say, I was probably a bit disrespectful back then, Ian, but with the more successes that you get, you know, Liam Scales coming across and obviously Johnny Kenny being the next one, you then start to have a newfound respect, I think, for the destination. And I know for a fact, for example, Jackie McNamara, who has got his finger on the pulse with up-and-coming talent, he does a lot of work over in Ireland. He thinks it's a hotbed of talent over there, Ian. And Johnny Kenny is definitely proven that, as has Liam Scales before him, isn't he? So with that success comes a newfound respect, I think, Ian, for the League of Ireland. Absolutely. And I mean, look, there's been some great players that have come across over the past, 30 years. Roy Keane, a prime example. Shane Long was a really good prolific striker in the not too distant past. The Hunt brothers, you know. I mean, I'm sure people in the comments will reel off lots of them. That's just the ones that have come into my head, just off the top of my head. But I do think the standard is all right. I think it's pretty decent, and I don't profess to watch it. But I have seen it in the past, and again, I think it's pretty a lot more old school, like Scotland is compared to England. There's that kind of, we still retain a soul, and you've got that. You know, it's I know it's not the main sport in Ireland. I don't think I wouldn't have thought, but it's certainly right up there. So I just like the Italians are sort of, you know, cherry picking players from our league in Scotland. We can maybe do a similar thing with Ireland, you know, and it's a mutually beneficial kind of route that's good for both parties. Yeah, without a doubt, and it's working well. It really is working well. And you know, there's another thing kind of bubbling under the surface, Lawrence, that I'm not sure exactly what it is, but all I can say is what I'm observing, and that is with regards to the upheaval, if you like, or the churn of players, the departures, if you like, from the women's team and the B team. There's a lot of players leaving the football club this summer, and you wonder what the approach is from Paul Tisdale, because he spoke about those two teams being part of his remit, if you like, when he gave that presentation at the Fans Forum, and we were able to get some notes from it. But it's almost like every other day you're hearing of another B team player who, by the way, maybe in the past would have, you know, stuck around for another year or two. There's a lot happening behind the scenes, isn't there, with the pathway manager being replaced. Darren O'Day goes to Swansea to join up with Snoop Dogg, and we get Sean Maloney. We've got the developments up at Barrowfield, massive developments, which there's not been much said about. I know there's a guy down there on a fairly regular basis flying drones to give kind of progress reports. But there's a lot happening, Lawrence, and we're having to try and join up the dots as to what the end game is. I believe that a player who's over 18 years of age, who's not going to bother the first team, has to either leave permanently and go out on loan. And it looks as though the club are doing that with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I think both the teams you mentioned are there's UEFA requirements to have them. So, you know, we don't have them, we don't get to play Champions League. But yeah, holding on to players 19, 20, 21, 22, holding on to a dozen of them, there's no point. We'll need to hold on to some to give them just for the Champions League squad. And it's a call, do you hold on to your better ones knowing they're not going to get many minutes throughout the season? Or are you going to let your better ones go out, get 6 months elsewhere, and hold on to something you think, you know, in an emergency, you could do a job. You're really just a fill in the Champions League that you could do as a job. But I don't think the B team's been great for development. Obviously, the changes in Brexit with Europe being close to the Premiership teams, they've come looking at young Scottish players again, and they're having to take them in bigger numbers, which is having an effect on us losing players to down south. You know, obviously, we've had Osman join us, not seen enough to really make a call on him. I think one game he had, you know, he looked like he was desperate to score from what I've seen of him, but we've invested a lot of money. I think the indoor park at Barrowfield's for the first team, you know, that's the only indoor park we've got. So how much we're going to invest in the women's game, I'm not too sure. There doesn't seem to be the appetite that's been shared on here amongst fans. Remember, we used to cover it. There seemed to be a great appetite for it. And I don't think Celtic are maybe investing at that level. The B team, they know they need to put something in there for the players to get through. And it is get these boys out on loan. Because I thought Summers looked okay. You know, some of the boys that are back to the club. I tell you what, that left back that's come back, what about his crossing? Right on the scales his head in. It's we're going to see a bit of that.
He's doing all right. He's doing all right, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's learned a bit since he's been away. Maybe that's what we should be doing for development for him. Throw him down to some English team and get him back. But no, it's great to see the boys get out and get some experience and building it up. We're looking at strikers. You know, Kenny's been super impressive. His attitude, his work rate, his finishing, his movement in the park. He's shown he's a team player, shown he's got that desire that Ian was talking about. He's putting a bit of pressure on either. You know, Brendan's talking about bringing in another striker, and I know we've got Japanese striker as well. I think we'll run with 3, and it's probably then who goes out on loan. Is it Kenny or is it a Japanese boy? Or if we bring in a big striker, you know, is either going to be the man? Is he going to be your number 2? Are
you saying that you do expect Brendan to bring in another striker, Lawrence?
I expect to bring in another striker.
And we still run with 3 at that stage. So, I mean, that leaves you top heavy, doesn't it? I mean,
it leaves you one too many. Yeah. And what's better for Johnny Kenny's development? Would it be 6 months at, I don't know, at Hibs that play football that's going to test him at a good level rather than sitting 6 months on our bench, not doing much? Would you put a Japanese boy out that's come straight in? I'm not sure. And yeah, I don't think we'll run with 4 strikers, but I expect one to come in. And that will leave the question of who's going out on loan, or would we sell either? I don't know.
Well, you know this, Lawrence, it is definitely something, it's a discussion point, right? So when you think about Johnny Kenny, there is a tendency, because we've done it so often in the past, Liam, where you say, oh, you know, maybe he would fit in at, you know, insert blank here, another Premiership club. I mean, how keen would the Hibs or Aberdeen be to take Celtic players at the moment? Because they seem to have ambitions of their own when it comes to recruitment and spending a bit of cash. I think Hibs bought a player the other week there for over £1 million. I'm not sure they would be as up for that as maybe they once were, if you like.
I think there's also the issue of what's the point of signing a good player if you can't play him against the best team in the league? You know, that's the other thing. It's like, well, if they took a player on loan from, you know, Aberdeen or St Mirren or whatever, it's not going to matter because you can afford to drop a player for those games. But if you are Hibs or Hearts or Aberdeen, you want to have your strongest possible team when you play Celtic. So anything that weakens that is going to be, I think that would be a consideration. I mean, I still think we could get those kind of deals done, but I think that is, as those clubs start to show more financial ambition, it is going to become more of a, well, no, we're not just here to develop Celtic's players for them. There's going to be that attitude. And to be honest, the Scottish game as a whole will be better for it. So I don't really have an issue with that.
Yeah, well, we're talking about Yamada as well, Liam, because obviously newest addition to the squad. The player I seen this morning, I shared it with the group, East Kilbride, just signed Lewis Dobby. So there is a lot of the kind of B team players being cut free, cut loose, as it were. I'm just going to run through the guys who have left and those who have arrived at the football club. There's a lot of incomings and departures, of course. Player number 1, Kieran Tierney, I think he's already been mentioned. Kieran Tierney's in, performing really well. Let's start off with him. How impressed have you been, Ian, with Kieran Tierney? Because I got the sense that in his first couple of games, they were absolutely just for fitness. He wasn't overlapping. He wasn't doing what Lawrence pointed out there that he was doing against Newcastle. And it was just to get up to speed. Wasn't it? And then you see him in the last couple of games, you think, right, he's got himself up to speed at the moment, and it is the Kieran Tierney, actually not even the Kieran Tierney of old, it's an improved version of Kieran Tierney that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be going against the grain if I said, he's a Rolls Royce of a player. I think he really is. And I'm really glad that he's back. We're lucky to have him back, I think. The fact that he wants to give, I mean, this is his peak years, really. If he stays sort of free of injury, and he stays for, that sort of the rate that players retire now is a lot older than it used to be. We could get another good sort of 5-6 years out of him. But yeah, I think he was just sort of easing himself into it. It was a nice introduction that he had. The way he was introduced sort of midway through the game or partway through the game against Newcastle, so he could have his moment, was really nice to see. And that cross was a cracker as well, wasn't it? Sort of just sort of throwback to when he was here before. But he is coming back an improved player. I mean, he turned himself into a specimen when he was a kid at Celtic. Obviously, that's partly why he got the move, really. That's how he kind of ratcheted up through the gears. But that experience playing in England and playing against top players week in, week out is only going to benefit him as a player, and certainly now us as a club of Celtic. And I just hope that we keep building upon this, the quality. I know that the sort of the tagline sort of alluding to that. But that's what Brendan Rodgers will demand. I know it's a different discussion whether Brendan's going to stay or not. I know Strachan's sort of been saying that it's got a shelf life, and he's kind of seems to think that Brendan might be heading off. But we need to keep that continuous improvement. And like sort of touching on what I said earlier on, it shouldn't be that we have to wait for one to go out for another one to come in. It's paramount that Brendan is given the absolute optimum opportunity to go and do what he does best, which is make the first team purr and sing and win trophies, and not have to sort of wait sort of for the start on the starting blocks for someone to say, right, away you go, because that could be the sort of the defining sort of line whether we sort of hit or miss in terms of targets that he really wants to get in.
Yeah, and again, you do concern yourself about the future of Brendan Rodgers, don't you? I mean, he alluded to the fact just the other week there, he spoke about meetings, and it was discussed. His future, the question of his future was discussed when he spoke to Dermot Desmond, and it will be interesting over the next few weeks to see whether or not a new deal will be signed. I'm going to bring in the comments in just a second, but before I do that, I got a really interesting text. I got a couple of pictures sent to me on WhatsApp, and this is the kind of perverted nature of my WhatsApp. People want to know if anybody out there can tell us. Look at that. This is how perverted it really is, Liam. We all have our foibles. This is the old Celtic frontage, the fascia, if you like, of Celtic Park. Some may remember as far back as then. And then obviously this was when a new roof was put on that, and obviously what they did at the time is the Celtic Football and Athletic Coibit, that level there that you see, and with the room above it, that was completely removed, and probably just skipped. But the circled elements of that are 3 plaques that used to adorn the front of Celtic Park, the entrance, as you see at the top of the Celtic Way. Interestingly enough, those letters, Lawrence, they were removed and put on the North Stand. You'll remember they were put above the jungle at one point, weren't they? So
Fergus loved to save money.
I love to save the dough.
Get his value for money.
Yeah, absolutely. Temporary stands being rented out, etc. We've heard it all. Now, the question being, what was on the plaques? That's the simple question. What was on the three plaques that are circled in that image? And I want you to let us know. There will be people tuning in who walked up to collect tickets and all sorts of things who will know exactly what was on there. The question has been asked of recent guest Tom Grant. Tom reckons at least one of them had a harp on it. So please let us know in the comment section. You'll see above the green door, the entrance there, that famous stained glass window that was removed, lost for a number of years, and then found and then reinstalled at Celtic Park. So what was on the plaques? Do any of you guys know? I don't. I've got to say I don't. I have no idea at this stage, but hopefully we can find out the answer to that question. It is a historical one, and I know that we've got a lot of knowledge in the comment section. Talking of which, let's bring some of you in here. Paddy Burns, here we go. No, we're talking about clearing the decks for quality. Paddy says no, because this board doesn't want to spend the money. There comes a point, no, Liam, where it doesn't make sense from a business perspective not to spend money, because you end up giving it to the taxman and corporate tax. It's corporation tax, rather. £7 million in the last financial year was given back to the taxman. There has to be a balance there.
I think, and maybe I'm being influenced by the shirt I'm wearing right now, but I think that results elsewhere tonight might have an impact on our transfer policy, because if, as I expect, Rangers get an absolute hiding tonight, which I think is quite possible, a lot of Celtic fans are naturally going to say, well, we need to make sure that doesn't happen to us in the qualifiers. So get the finger out. And it might spook the board into a wee bit of action. Because I really do think that it's a case of, yeah, you might drop 10, 15 million to sign 2 or 3 really good players. But if that gets you 40 million for getting into the Champions League, then you've already repaid your investment, and that's before you even factor in, additional merchandise sales, shirts, names on the back of shirts, whatever. You'll recoup by signing big names. You'll recoup money anyway, whether you play in the Champions League or not. But I think there is that very clear financial incentive for us to spend a wee bit just now.
Yeah, no, and that's my concern, Liam, because I think we should be making decisions based on where we want to go as a football club.
But this board is reactionary. That's the issue. They are always reactionary.
This is the issue. And I think that also when you look at whether or not we qualify for the Champions League, how much money will we spend? That doesn't work for me, because you're backing yourself into a corner, you're painting yourself into a corner, and you're running out of time. And then it's counterproductive, Ian, because you're leaving things so late that you end up paying more for the players that are on your radar. And I just think that, there was a real different approach, I think, when Ange Postecoglou came in. I know that there had to be, because we had to bring in players that were going to make an impact immediately in the starting 11. The Midtjylland games came too early for Ange to have stamped his authority on that side, and his style and his mentality on the playing staff. But we had to act, and we had to act quickly, and we did in Ange's first season, and it proved to us that it can be done. I mean, that wasn't that long ago, and how much has changed since then in terms of doing business with other football clubs. So I sometimes feel as though we roll out these excuses as a football club. It's hard to do business, etc., and all this kind of stuff. Get out and get the business done would always be my approach, and I think Celtic need to be a wee bit more aggressive with that, Ian.
I agree, and I think in terms of the sort of the person that we brought in under Ange, Carter Vickers and Jota were both loans, weren't they? So they were sort of higher fees. Probably didn't go above that threshold. That had to get sign off from Dermot Desmond. So maybe the fact that it was done so quickly was the fact that it was players he knew and identified, and they were any of them above 4 million, 3.5 million? Was it Kyogo 3.5 million, or was it more than that? Can't remember.
I think it was about closer to 4.5 actually, because we made a tidy profit on him. Yeah,
but I wonder if that sort of plays a part. The fact that we're now looking to push the envelope a little bit more and go for the sort of the bigger sort of named, sort of the bigger valued players. That's the risk averseness really sort of coming to the fore, and flushing that kind of attitude out. It goes against us. It really does, and it's like, if we wait for a big sale, it's looking like we're looking at even Yang might go out for what, 3 odd million. That's ridiculous. The amount of money we have in the bank, we're waiting for these players to go out before we go out and replace them. We've already lost Kuhn, and we've got a fair penny for him, considering what we got him for and kind of what he contributed, pro rata over the course of his time here. Again, I'm just going to repeat what I said before. We need to just go out. We identify the players that we want. Brendan Rodgers will probably have, he'll be sort of steadfast in what he wants. Go out and get them, give them to Brendan so we can work with them. And the rest of the stuff could, there's people in positions that are paid. They go and, sell on the other guys, But it's it goes against us, the fact that we're sort of hanging fire, waiting for one in, one out. It just doesn't work.
No, I know, and we've seen this movie before. Let's get more comments from the viewers. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Celtic World Order podcast. I've got to say, Steve, big shout out to you. You were wearing one of the Casper Saves t-shirts on your show the other day, and you wear it well. Let's just say that. Osmond has to be the one striker to go on loan. I agree with that, actually, because I mentioned it last week and people were saying, why would we bring him in? Well, that's what you do. It's a development loan. He's not going to learn anything playing in the Lowland League. He's 19 years of age. Get him out on loan, get him football. I could see one of the partnerships working for him. Admira Wacker, for example, go out there, even though, the level of football may not be great. I think it would benefit a 19-year-old. I think Ben Summers is proof of that. What else can be gained from Kenny going out again? As for Shin, seems redundant loaning him. Would be sensible to keep him with his countrymen to settle. Now, again, we don't know the intricacies of this, Liam. We can only speculate in terms of the recruitment of our 2 newest Japanese imports. But it's something you and I were very critical of after Ange left the football club, not having that onus on ensuring that we were still bringing in Japanese talent. These 2 guys have come in. If it's from the same eye, if it's from the same process, I think Inamura has been very, very positive. Hopefully Yamada can be the same. I wouldn't expect him to go out. What's your take on it?
No chances is the boy Fane going out on loan, as some have nicknamed him. I think Shin Yamada has come to Celtic because he's got an outside chance of making Japan's World Cup squad, right? He'll do that by playing for us and getting into the Champions League, scoring goals there, scoring goals in big derby games, whatever. Things that will get him noticed. He's not going to get noticed if he goes out on loan to Hibs, with the greatest of respect to them, right? So a loan is not on the cards for him. And I think he would probably have made sure that was clear before he signed, because he's coming to a big club in Europe to get his chance at making the World Cup. I think it might be a bit too soon for him. I don't see him displacing the strikers that Japan have at the moment, because I don't think Kyogo will either. I don't think either of them will be at the World Cup next summer. Dyson will. Hatati's probably about a 75-80% chance he'll be there as well. But I think it might be too soon for Yamada. But it will depend on what he does with Celtic this season. If he has an outstanding season, then anything's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I do want to talk about comments made yesterday about Dyson Maeda. Quinny and I were talking about Maeda, and some people have, I think, misunderstood or misinterpreted what Quinny was talking about. Quinny does not think he's worth 50 million quid, is the point that I want to make. What we were saying yesterday is it's unthinkable for us to actually sell him in this window. And the fact that if you add him and Kyogo and Kuhn and their goal contributions together, Lawrence, from last season, goals and assists, it's 97 goals and assists from those 3 players. And from that perspective, it's unthinkable that we would sell Maeda. I don't care if it's 25 or 30. And Quinny just said, in terms of who is worth what, it's an abstract figure. and the figure could be as abstract as 50 million. It doesn't matter. It's a hands-off. That's all we were saying. No one is claiming Maeda is worth 50 million quid. But it would be unthinkable, Lawrence, for us to sell him. That would put a completely different hue on things in relation to the fans' relationship with the board at this stage.
Yeah, I think he's been our best import from Japan. That Ange brought in for us. Everything he gives the team, his work rate, his attitude, his desire on that park. It's going to be great to see him and KT on that left-hand side. The right backs, right midfielders that are going to be facing them up, they're going to be having nightmares just now, and the season's not kicked off. So cannot sell Maeda. I would say on the recruitment though, we've brought in 2 first-team starters, and KT I think is probably the best player at the club. Negram's a first-team starter. They're in earlier than usual. I think the recruitment team, looks to have done well so far. I get that people are saying, rush out and get stuff in. Not everybody's available at one time. What if this board let spend their money, then somebody becomes available and we don't have the money for them? In general, I think the recruitment team does well. Having money in the bank, what's the money for? I think we had like 70 or 80 million at the close of the season, but the board will be as aware of us that we need the South Stand modernised, probably rebuilt. I think, the number's floated at 100 million. Another season and we're paying that without any debt. So perhaps that's the plan. They don't tend to share too much information with us. I'm not too sure how much they should share, but maybe that's their plan. And tonight's result, I don't know. I'd hate to think it had any impact on our plans. I mean, there was a club not so long ago that used to set their recruitment policy and spend by what their neighbours done. If you spend a fiver, we'll spend a tenner. And we know that leads to the death of the club. So it's not kind of really want Celtic to go down and do that. Will tonight's result heighten what the fans want? Probably. If the unthinkable was to happen and the Irish team, the Greek Irish, were to get beat, we'd all be disappointed. We feel that familiar relationship with them. So you'd hope that they would go out and win for no other reason that they were started, obviously, by Irish immigrants and share that part of their history with us. So,
what you're saying is right. You're spot on. It should not have a bearing, but there's always these concerns, Lawrence, isn't there? By the way, the 5 or 10 comment, the most absurd part of that comment, after what actually followed in 2012, is that the person making the comment stands by it. Bizarre. And no one holds them to account. No one holds them to account either. Absolutely bizarre.
But listen, the board might be. Listen, we all know that's outstanding. It's done.
Well, the pictures I shared, right? This was a conversation that we had with Tom Grant, so I'll bring them back up. The pictures that I actually shared earlier on. This is obviously the old fascia, but in terms of the stand, parts of the stand are the original stand that are 100 years old.
Yeah, Tom was saying it's all the original steelwork. Founds have been strengthened. There's bits of strengthening. All the timber's been taken out. The steelworks, it must be by its lifespan or what you'd expect. If it does cost 100 million and the recruitment team finds gems like they've been doing, we could pay that off without having to go to the bank.
Would you want to do that though? Would you want to do that though? Would that make sense? Just because you've got it, you would want to have a bit of the best of both worlds, wouldn't you, Lawrence, as a business?
I'm sure if we had an accountant at a club, he'd know the best way to do it, best way to spend the money. But
haven't we got a boardroom full of them?
Some would say we're run by them, but I'm not too sure how much that's got to do with the boardroom. But yeah, it's like, look, it's going to cost us a serious amount of money, isn't it? And if you put it all in the park, then would you want to have to borrow? Maybe it's mixed economy. Maybe you pay for half of it, borrow the other half.
Yeah.
There's been talk about the hotel and the museum for so long. For me, that should be a no-brainer. Get that up. It gives you extra hospitality facilities that you can use when the main stand's getting redeveloped.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's something that we have spoken about on this channel since day one. I don't really pay much heed to what Newcastle fans have been saying after the game. But a lot of what they were saying about the stadium is something that we've been talking about on here for a long, long time. And, you know, once you get to the Champions League stage and you don't have the facilities for the media and there's a marquee at the front and all this kind of stuff, let's behave like a Champions League team. I think that if you do that, you'll always be ahead of the domestic game.
But your Tom Grant interview, you know, Ferguson's plan for it.
Yeah.
We were going to do the aesthetics. Jeez. And I just haven't done it. And those banners, nice as they are, they don't cut it really, do they? It looks a bit cheap, doesn't it? You know, surely we can do better than that. Is that,
yeah.
You know, it's not the optimum for Celtic Park. So you hope that, you know, they're earmarking some of this money for redevelopment in the main stand. Because let's be honest, we've got 10,000 seat advantage just now. You could easily put another 10 in there. You know, you've got 20,000 seat advantage.
I know.
Just building that inbuilt financial advantage. And I guess it's known what the hungry number is. That's what Tom called it, isn't it? What's the hungry number?
The hungry. Yeah, the hungry number. I think what you need to do is you need to focus on this waiting list and make sure that it's an accurate and up-to-date waiting list. I don't think it's been updated enough or worked on enough, Lawrence. It's obviously there and it's vast. But when you've got the CEO saying, "Oh, you know, we got to 500 or 600 in the list before we got a bite at a ticket and all that," that's because your list is outdated and it's been closed for years as well.
But how often do they engage with them? You know,
exactly.
I get that the purpose of the waiting list is they're waiting for a season, but they're also interested in other things about Celtic. Are you putting events on at Celtic Park and inviting them along at a discount? Listen, we know you're on the waiting list. Why don't you come along? We've got this event on a Friday night when we've got an away game on a Saturday. Whatever it is, you need to keep that engagement going, don't you?
They don't even do that with the season ticket holders, Lawrence, who are investing in the football club. But you're right, the engagement has to improve. Celtic 88, it's a big window for Frame. Boom, thanks for that. We've also got Craig Gordon coming in. Not the Craig Gordon, I don't think. I'm looking
he's on his honeymoon, mate.
Is he? Where did he go? Anstruther?
I don't know. I don't know if someone would have put up with Anstruther, mate. Is that where you go on the honeymoon in Fife?
Whoa. Don't knock Fife. I'm looking forward to seeing Yamada, Craig Soma. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if anything, it really is something that particularly Liam and I have discussed in relation to, just because our eye on the that particular market has left the football club, doesn't mean to say we shouldn't continue to go in there and see what the talent is. And we've spoken about it since Ange left, really, Liam. So it's good to see that we're bringing these guys in. Inamura so far looks very good. Let's have a look at Yamada. He joins, of course, a number of players who have joined the football club alongside Kieran Tierney, Ross Doohan, Benji Nygren, Callum Osmond, Inamura, and, of course, Yamada. But the one guy I want to talk about from that list who we haven't really spoken about is Nygren. And I'll come to you first, Liam. Again, cheap. We know why he was cheap. But a player who, at 23, plays like a man beyond his years. He does have the experience, of course, in his legs. But so far, so good. He looks like a snip.
Well, remember, this is a guy who, despite only being 23, has already played in multiple European leagues and for the Swedish national team. So he's got a lot more experience than probably a lot of players far older than him in terms of where he's played and the types of opponents that he's faced. So, he looks. We lack that creative spark in midfield last season, and I think he's going to be the one to bring it. It's great because I initially thought he was coming in as a direct replacement for Kuhn, but he seems like a totally different player from what we've seen of him.
Yeah.
I think he might start on the wings where we're getting up to numbers, but I think he'll be a midfielder for the season, Liam. I think that's where he's going to play, isn't it? Engels will feel a bit of pressure.
Pressure. He's heard that before. Isn't he? Here we go. There's an interesting one here from RM, and I'm going to throw this out not only to the contributors, to the audience as well. We're talking South Stand. I obviously shared a couple of old pictures there. Never give naming rights away or lose many fans forever. I want to discuss this, right? I remember having done the study of Celtic jerseys to the nerds kind of degree, as you have to do. Reading letters that were penned in the Celtic View following a couple of different changes to the jersey. The first one being the addition of the club crest on the hoops, and the second one being the addition of sponsorship for the first time on the hoops. And people wrote in to the Celtic View, Ian, saying you have desecrated the traditions of this great football club, and I'll never be back until you stop advertising a double glazing firm on the hoops. This is the kind of thing that happened. People were absolutely incensed at the fact that Celtic were desecrating the hoops, if you like. And there's a similar kind of attitude in a lot of the comments we get when we're talking about naming rights. Isn't it just a sign of the times? Would it change your view on Celtic Park? Would we still call it Celtic Park, Parkhead, Paradise? I know there's a few other terms that I'm not going to repeat. It's not as though you would start calling it, enter sponsor's name here, Stadium. I don't think we would change our kind of view of it. What's your take on naming rights, Ian? Would you allow it?
It depends how much money, I suppose, was on offer. I personally wouldn't want it. I think it's quite a cheap, nasty kind of thing. I know, obviously, Spotify, who is the example with the Camp Nou, don't know how much they're investing, but it must be a lot for Barcelona to have gone down that route. So whether it was, a significant amount of money that enables to build a new stand or whatever, and it really future-proofed, I keep using that word, but, future-proofed for generations to come, then I wouldn't be against it. But if it's a nominal amount of, a few million, the board would only hold it anyway. So I don't think it was, I think it would be just counterproductive. And I just think it would just cheapen what is kind of an iconic stadium and brand, which is Celtic Football Club.
Celtic Park, Parkhead, Paradise, they're the top three. And then there's the kind of like, I don't know.
Don't say it.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. If you say it 3 times, it appears. Right, I'm not saying it. Lawrence, what's your view on it? Because in many, many respects, I'm very traditional with the kind of authenticity as a football club that Celtic still, I think, retains in many, many facets. However, I do look at other aspects of the game. I look at the things that hold us back in terms of the financial element, the Scottish football, the broadcasting, the sponsorship, not being anywhere near what it should be. And I look at that and I think if a business, if an outside agency was to come in and speak to the Celtic board, that's one of the things they would say is an absolute open goal to them. Sell the naming rights. What's your take on it?
To me, the stadium's still, the main stand, Celtic end, the jungle, and even after Rangers died, still call it Rangers end. So, if it was to be sold, I'd still call the stands that. I'd still call it Celtic Park. I wouldn't like us to get around, what was it, Dumbarton, Strathclyde home stadium. They couldn't get rid of that name, even though the company went bust. So that depends on the ins and outs of the deal. As long as it's still Celtic Park, it might be Emirates Celtic Park or, we've got the Emirates Arena across the road. Yeah, I don't see any problem with taking the money as long as it's not, permanently sold forever. If somebody's more or less sponsoring the stadium for 5 or 10 years, 100%. I'd go for that. I think it's money there that can be used to improve the football club. That's it. If we're not doing it, it's probably a wee bit remiss of them, I think, to say, look, maybe we could be getting 10 million over the next 5 years just for calling it, I don't know, the Guinness Celtic Park, whoever wants to sponsor us.
That was the example given by Tom Grant. I know that a lot of people will go back through the history books and say they don't want Guinness's name on it. However, in terms of the financial element, you've given a figure there over 5 years. The English Premiership average per season for naming rights is £8.4 million. I know that we can't really compete in that same world, but let's say it was 10 million quid, Liam, for argument's sake, over 5 years. What's your take on this? Because I just think there's a normalisation. I mean, you look at the Celtic jersey. We've had betting firms and bevy firms on there for 20 years, right? There's a name on the front, there's a name on the back, there's a name on the sleeve. No one minds when it's the FC Foundation. Absolutely not. You would not mind the Celtic Foundation being on that jersey. But we've now got 3 sponsors on the jersey. It wasn't that long ago we had the Tenants T on the shorts. I remember I used to look at these South American teams normally, where they had a dozen sponsors on their jersey, Liam, back in the day, and you thought that would never happen. Well,
Belgium is the worst for that now. See, if you look at the Belgian league, there are so many good shirts in the Belgian league that are ruined by having about 15 sponsors on them, honestly.
And it cheapens it. It makes you look like a sandwich board, but it does get normalised in time until the point where if someone's watched Celtic for 30 years, 40 years, they've never watched it. I have never watched a Celtic team playing without a sponsor on their jerseys, other than that one season where we couldn't get a sponsor between C.R. Smith and Peoples.
Who scored the first goal in a sponsor jersey, mate?
I'm going to say Davy Provan.
No. Peter Grant's spot away.
Granty.
Yeah, I think it was September by the time it scored. Yeah. 2 penalties in the game we got. 3-2.
Cries of Judas coming from the top tier of the stand.
No.
I probably wrote about it in the book, Lawrence, but I don't have a photographic memory, unfortunately. But no, that's a good shout, Granty. What's your take on it, Liam? Because as I say, we are talking money, we're talking finances. Ian makes a point. It's just another £2.5 million for them to store every year. Absolutely get that as well. It was brought up, so we'll discuss it. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it will happen anyway?
I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think that it's enough money to warrant the sort of reputational damage that we get from selling out.
Selling your soul.
If it was like something ridiculous, like 50 or 60 million a year, you would say, okay, fine, call it the Inland Revenue Arena. I don't care, right? But I don't think that a simple 10 million or 8 to 10 million a year, and we wouldn't get that because that's what England are getting, right? We would get a slither of that. We'd be lucky to get a tenth of that because of footballing snobbery. So it's not for me. But at the end of the day, if it did happen, none of us we'll be angry about it for a while, and then we'll just go back to calling it Celtic Park because that's what Newcastle have done, right? The Sports Direct Arena they play at or something officially.
Well, this is the thing. It wouldn't change our view of what we call the stadium. I'm looking at Murrayfield. Let me think. The revenue. Let's someone in the comment section let us know how much they get for the naming rights at Murrayfield as well, because that would be more in line, I think, than looking at EPL prices. But thanks for bringing up the comment. It was a good one. It's something I'm pretty sure the board are considering. No doubt. David Boyle, Celtic clearing the decks, but really with hunters in the bank, almost hundreds of millions in the bank, we should have had the replacements in ready for the Champions League instead of haggling over pennies. I agree with you, David, and I made the point yesterday, but it was disagreed with in the comment section. I believe that your January business has to be done with one eye on the Champions League the following season, not just to try and strengthen for that particular season. You never know how long it's going to take for a player to bed in. Brendan McCarthy, hail boys. I think Kuhn's a good example of that. Jesus, I hope we are, and we do sign some quality, talking about clearing the decks to bring in the quality, and Joe Hamilton on the YouTube afternoon troops. It makes sense. 2 or 3 good signings, a Brendan extension, and we'll be off to another great season. Well, the 2 or 3 good signings that you're talking about, I think you're talking about the guys that you would have no issue starting Champions League games in. Kieran Tierney's already in the door. Nygren could be a bit of a surprise package. Inamura certainly looks like a surprise package. But yeah, another couple of players of that ilk. Now, ladies and gents, earlier on today, I pre-recorded an interview with a couple of movie makers, documentary makers from Australia. They have made a documentary feature length about Ange Postecoglou, his relationship with Ferenc Puskás during the period that Puskás went over to manage South Melbourne. Unbelievable tale, incredible archive footage, and recent interviews with Ange Postecoglou himself. We are, Acsom, hosting the Scottish film premiere of this documentary. It's happening this Saturday. It's at Barazat Design. The uptake has been incredible. It's a feather in our cap. We're very proud to be the guys who are going to be hosting the Scottish film premiere. First time we've done a film premiere of this kind. Hopefully not the last. And hopefully you can come and join us. But the interview that I've done with the filmmakers will be on the channel at some point this week. A couple of wee tweaks, a couple of wee edits, and we'll have it up on the channel. Danny Boy, why do some fans think some players will jump at the chance to come here? We don't have that kind of pull. Players and their agents have to be convinced coming here is a good career move. But I think
that depends where you're coming from.
I think we're aware of that. Yeah, I think we're well aware of this, Liam. I think we know where we are in that respect. And I think there's a certain type of player, there's a certain profile of player that is absolutely perfect. Celtic is perfect for them. And I think we've proved that. And we know that, generally speaking, unless it's a Kieran Tierney type scenario, generally, or a Jota, we have to buy a player that we know we have to develop in. But I think fans, again, going into that normalisation of things, fans accept that now, don't we?
Yeah, we do. So can you just repeat the question again? I cut out.
You know, the type of player that we sign, the profile of player that we sign is very, very often someone who you're taking a chance on, whose career has gone off-piste, or it's a player who is a classic project player. We need to develop them into the player we want them to be. Unless it's like Tierney, who came as a ready-made player who walks into the team, or Jota second time round. I've got to clarify that. We know what we're getting with Jota second time round. But generally speaking, players of a certain ilk and profile will want to come to Celtic because we offer them that platform to develop.
Yeah. We've got that kind of, I suppose, conveyor belt situation going on now. I suppose the only disappointment is that because we are that kind of stepping stone, we're not getting to sort of keep a team together as long as we'd like as fans. And that kind of impinges on, I suppose, how well we could do in Europe, for example. If you look at all the teams, even go right back to sort of Neil Lennon with the Wanyamas and all that kind of stuff. Imagine if we kept all those sort of players that we sort of came to know and love together and sort of built a kind of a super team out of those ones that didn't actually get the chance to sort of be together. Or if they did, it wasn't for very long. But again, that's our model and it's working, you know, and you can't sort of renege on it if you make a promise to these players to entice them and then you renege on it, then word spreads, you know, bad news travels, and then we kind of won't get the breaks that we're getting. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I suppose, to use that idiom. But that's kind of the way it is. But we are where we are until we end up in a European Super League or get invited to the Super Duper LinkedIn League. Then sort of the status quo will remain, I'm sure.
The Super Duper LinkedIn League, sponsored by Huel. Yes, I can just see it now, Ian. Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. These things sometimes go on different paths and tangents, but it's always Celtic related. We always bring it back to Celtic. I'm going to show you these images for the last time today. We have been asked what were on these plaques on the fascia, the original. I say original, it wasn't the original stand, but it was certainly kind of rebuilt in the 20s. What were on these plaques? Tom Grant thinks at least one of them was a harp. Let us know in the comment section. Always interested to hear your thoughts on that. Lawrence?
I'm going to guess the three parishes, mate.
That's a good shout, actually. Yeah.
Oh, why? That's a possibility.
That's a very, very good shout. In fact, I would love that to be the answer.
We'd have a sit with it.
I would love that to be that. If they were so historically tuned in to make that, you know, the case. And they probably would have been back in those days when they were redeveloping it first time round. I'll tell you who's going to know that. I bet you. Well, Brendan Sweeney will probably know the answer.
Oh, Brendan will definitely know. Yeah, Brendan will know.
He'll know the answer. And I think probably David Potter would have known the answer. There's a book on the stadium. I don't know if it's in there. I'll need to dig it out. Dear Green Paradise, I think it is, that David wrote, the dearly departed David Potter. So the answer will be out there. Let us know in the comments section. Always an absolute pleasure to chat for an hour a day. Liam has nailed his colours to the mast for this evening's game. He'll probably be in his bed whilst it's playing, though, I've got to say. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Click on all the good stuff underneath this video for links to our blog and our merch and our live events and our charitable endeavours. And thank you for joining us once again on a Celtic State of Mind.